Hello and welcome to another episode of 1000 Actually Fun Books, where we review books of every genre looking for the best of fun escapist books. Today we're reviewing a nonfiction book called All Creatures Great and Small by James Herriot. This, I thought actually it was historical fiction, but it turns out it's actually nonfiction. So this is actually a memoir of James Herriot's life as a veterinarian in the late 30s. This takes place over the course of about 2 years, from, I want to say it mentioned it at some point, but like 1939 to 1940 or something like that. So during the Great Depression, this takes place in England, in a pastoral, very rural area. Very, very interesting. So each chapter in this book is almost, not totally, but almost a self-contained mini story of something that just happened. It could just be a person doing a weird thing, an animal doing a weird thing, himself doing a weird thing. It's just all the stories have kind of a lighthearted humor to them that, some of them are very funny, some of them are just interesting, but they're all good. They're all well done. So it's lots of little stories about his life in the first couple of years of his experience being a vet in rural England. So it doesn't have a plot beyond that. There isn't a story arc, so to speak. It is just little snippets of life. And it's very, very fascinating. So let's talk about some of the things I like. One of which would be the historical details. So this does take place during the Great Depression of this era, and it has all sorts of interesting historical details from things like, for example, the veterinarians. They graduate from school, and many of them basically can't find work. So they make advertisements. I will pay you to get experience, that kind of thing. And the college is like, you need to stop publishing those those notices in the newspaper. Is giving us a bad reputation. People will stop wanting to be veterinarians if you have that kind of thing. Or James Herriot's car. So there's multiple cars in this because they keep crashing them. But it's an interesting experience with the car because I'm used to modern cars. And these cars apparently are completely different than a modern car. Like, talk about zero safety features and stuff like that. Like, the first car he gets into, the passenger seat, isn't even bolted to the frame of the vehicle. He gets in, and it's like sitting in a rocking chair. It literally moves all over and slides. He bangs his head on the windshield when it comes to a stop, that kind of stuff. Or how well this car is held together. It is, they say, you pretty much daily have to patch the tires. And I'm sitting there going, daily patching the tires? Are you kidding me? And it guzzled half a gallon of oil every day. And again, I'm like, really? Wow. It just, things like that all the time that you're just, you just can't even imagine in today's society to have a car that acts like this. Or some other things, they talk about, many of the rural areas don't have electricity. That's kind of a newfangled thing in a lot of these farms. And the medical practices, he talks about this very blatantly in this, that when he first started, there's all sorts of concoctions that they made, pretty much all of which later was discovered to be completely useless. But there were, on the other hand, some newfangled ideas that were just coming into the forefront of medicine and how this was impacting veterinary life. For example, there was one thing that was fatal to cows. I think it was a calcium shortage or something, or a magnesium shortage. I can't remember, because they give so much milk, right? They're getting a shortage of some sort of mineral, and the cow would basically just collapse. And if they gave them an injection of the vitamin that they were missing, then the cow would be like, within an hour, get up and be fine. And this was practically a miracle. They were like, the farmers were like, whoa, it's so amazing. And the veterinarian is patting himself on the back going, yes, it's so amazing. I can fix this problem. Whereas before, they would just die. So this was a new thing. So anyway, all these kinds of historical details, really interesting. So the characters, It's mostly all variety of interesting characters, but the most interesting ones are the ones that recur a lot in the story. Obviously, we have James. James is in every story because it's all from his perspective. And you kind of get an impression he remembers this because he kept a journal or a diary of some variety and wrote a bunch of this stuff down, which is why he remembers and can write this book about this. But anyway, so he, by himself, is an interesting character, but I'm going to come back to him in a second. So his boss is a very peculiar character. It definitely has personality. And the boss has a brother, a younger brother, and they both do veterinary stuff, and they kind of, and James lives with him as part of, he gets room and board as part of his career being a vet there. So you got his vet boss who hired him, so James is an assistant, and then Tristan is the brother. And Tristan is kind of this lazy layabout. He doesn't really want to work. He doesn't, he kind of fails his college classes. He's just, and so the boss, and I can't remember his name, so I'm just calling the boss. The boss constantly is yelling at his brother, "Oh, you're fired!" And the brother slinks away and comes back the next day, and all is forgotten. And then the next day, "Oh, you've done this wrong. You're fired!" And the brother Tristan slinks away again, and it's this kind of just this ongoing drama with the family, and it's funny. And then again, the boss's personality, where he constantly tells James, "Hey, you need to do things this way," and James is like, "Okay," so he does it that way, and then the boss comes back and says, "No, why are you doing it that way? You should have been doing it this way," which is the way James had been doing it to begin with. And James is like, "Okay, but you told me," and he's like, "I can't believe you would do it that way." And James is like, "Okay, whatever." So we've got those main characters. Then we've got other people, somebody who has, I wouldn't call it a purse dog because I don't think she actually carries in a purse, but think of that idea. A little dog that she dotes on and has clothes for and throws parties for, that kind of personality that our main character is kind of like, "Sure, okay, whatever," And, other farmers who, they've been farming for generations and they know all there is to know about the animals, and this vet clearly doesn't know a thing. That kind of thing, where you have all sorts of personalities that he has to deal with. Okay, so I liked the characters a lot in this. And coming back to our main character. So our main character, his personality, he does poke fun at himself sometimes, but that's not really the main focus on his personality. He comes across very much as a laid-back, non-confrontational, non-argumentative, for the most part, cooperative personality. He wants everybody, let's just get along. So like his boss and the brother that fight, James is like, "I want to leave the room." Like, he does not want to be part of this conflict. And I find this very relatable. It's totally relatable. I'm like, this is my personality right there. I do not like the conflict. So I could totally relate to him. But he did have some other qualities of characteristics that I wanted to point out. One of which I'm going to read on page 194 and 195, and that is his integrity. A man called him out to examine a dead cow. So in that day, all the cows are kind of insured, in that if an act of God, i.e. a lightning bolt, kills a cow, an insurance company will pay the cost of the cow. But if the cow dies for some other reason, a disease or something, food poisoning, whatever, then the insurance will not pay for it. So the farmers want the vet to come out and say, "Yes, that cow died from a lightning strike," so the insurance will pay for the cow, so they don't lose out on the value of the cow. So James went out, examined a cow, and he's like, there is no sign of lightning. There was no storms, there was no lightning bolts. This cow dropped dead in a field that clearly he was struggling before she died. And, the grass is all torn up, and there's no scorch marks. This cow did not get struck by lightning. But the farmer's like, "No, clearly it was lightning." And so the farmer's response is, we should do an autopsy. And the farmer was like, no, it's definitely lightning. Because he wants it to be paid for. Why do you have to be so damn particular? The farmer said. Why indeed, I thought. Why make an enemy of this man? He wielded a lot of power in the district. Prominent in the local farmers' union, a member of every agricultural committee for miles around. He was a wealthy, successful man, and if people didn't like him, they respected his knowledge and listened to him. He could do a young vet a lot of harm. Why not write the certificate and go home? This is to certify that I've examined the above-mentioned animal, and in my opinion, lightning stroke was the cause of death. It'd be easy, and Cranford would be mollified. It'd be the end of the whole thing. Why antagonize this dangerous character for nothing? Maybe it was lightning anyway. I turned to face Mr. Cranford, trying in vain to look into the eyes that always veered away at the last moment. I'm sorry, but I feel we ought to have a look inside the cow. And then he goes on and does do the autopsy and discovers that it's not a lightning strike. There's very obvious disease issues. And because there's disease issues, he shouldn't write that it was a lightning strike. But still, the farmer insists, just write it up as a lightning strike. Who cares what the truth is? Just give me what I want so that I can get the money. And our vet, James, wouldn't do it. He stuck to the truth, even though there was a lot of pressure there that nobody would know if he fudged the report, and he didn't do it. So this is a man with integrity. I really liked that. So our main character is very likable. Most of the story is really about things that happen to him. He's more passive in a lot of respects. But in this area, this particular story, he was part of the story in a strong way, and I liked the way his character came out in this and throughout the whole book. Okay, the next thing I'm going to say in here is the humor. So there are lots of humorous stories of animals doing ridiculous things, but mostly people doing ridiculous things. The animals are not anthropomorphized in this. There's a little bit of that, the dog that obviously loves his owner, or the cow that's anxious for her calf, or having fun giving the vet the runaround, or whatever it may be. But for the most part, it's not really about personalities of the animals. This isn't like Babe or Charlotte's Web, where the animals are people. No, they're definitely animals. So it's usually the people that do weird things. But I'll give you a humorous example. This one has to do not really so much about the animals. It has to do with the people. Okay, so here's the stage setting. The boss sends out monthly bills, and the farmers tend to get the bills about the same time and kind of en masse show up one day a month, pay off their bills, and go along their way. Well, one day he has his brother take the money, and the brother is supposed to write down in the ledger, "This bill has been paid." Well, he did so, but he lost the ledger. And of course, they had to dust up there between the brothers about this, but the ledger's lost. So the boss goes, okay, well, I guess we'll just send everybody the same bill they got last month. Well, and of course, all the farmers out there kind of come on and go, I already paid this bill. What are you doing? So month 2, they come, they argue about it, and the vet boss basically just says, if anybody comes and says they paid their bill, no problem, we'll write down that they paid their bill, and that'll be the end of it. No big deal. So he goes to his favorite tavern, and there he meets one of the farmers, and the farmer is the same story. The farmer comes up to him and says, hey, I already paid this bill. And he says to the guy at the tavern, no problem, this is the circumstances, I believe you paid your bill, let me buy you a pint. Totally fine. But the boss does not have a great memory. He forgets to write down that the guy paid his bill. Month 3 comes around, and the bills go out again. So the guy at the tavern comes up to him and says, clearly you do not believe I paid this bill. And the vet boss is like, oh, I'm so sorry. No, I believe you paid it. He's like, no. You don't believe I paid this bill because I have a bill for the 3rd month in a row. So we're gonna do a coin toss. Heads, I will pay this bill for the second time and we'll be done with this. Tails, then we will be square. I will have already paid the bill. You're not gonna bother me again about this. And the vet boss is like, yeah, okay, that's fine. Coin toss, it comes up heads. The guy calmly pulls out money, pays the bill again. And the boss forgets to write it down. So guess what happens on month 4? The bill goes out again. And the vet boss is like, I am going to switch taverns, because he did not want to deal with this again. So it's just kind of a funny experience of personality. You get the idea about the boss here, who's just like a little bit too forgetful in a lot of areas. But this would be an example of some of the humor. And you think about that and go, this actually happened, but you could see how that could actually happen. I totally would believe that would actually happen. So there's lots of stories like that of just people being ridiculous. And so the humor was great. It was not totally all the time incredibly funny, but I definitely snickered several times throughout going through and reading this. Several chapters were just pretty funny. Okay, so vet details would be the last thing I like about this. So I know nothing about veterinary stuff, or at least very little, especially not anything about big animals, because he's mostly a big animal vet, dealing with cows, horses, sheep, pigs. That's his main area, with a little bit of small animal, dogs, cats, etc., for pets in the area. So some of the details about dealing with animals, lots of them I'd never known anything about. Some of them I'm not sure I really wanted to know. Like the fact that a cow giving birth to a calf can push so hard she can push the uterus right out of herself. And the vet has to come along and stuff it back in. And I'm like, wow, that's interesting. I don't think I wanted to have that visual, but okay, so I learned something new. There's a lot of vet medicine in there that you learn something new. Okay, there are a handful, small, tiny amount of things that I didn't love about this book. One of which I'm going to say is the language. It is, both has technical jargon, so again, this is a veterinarian talking about veterinary stuff, and sometimes he'll mention medicines or diseases or whatever, and doesn't give a very good description of it. You're like, what is this? What is wrong with this animal? They mention, oh, I think this animal has such and such, and you just don't have any idea what they're talking about because you've never heard of this disease. So there's a little bit of technical jargon. There's also a lot of accents going on. So this is a rural part of England, and sometimes I'm not sure that it's not just like a local slang that I've never heard of when it talks about some things, which it definitely has some of that going on, but it also is written in an accent form. So sometimes, like for example, out is, if somebody is speaking it, it would be A-W-T, ought, instead of out, right? It's not spelled in the book the way it should be spelled. Instead, it's spelled to show you the accent. And sometimes that makes for some words that you're like, what is that word? Like A-L-L-U-S. What is that word? Allus. Alias? It's always. And you have to look at it and kind of go, what is that? And read really slowly and carefully and sound out some of the words to figure out what it is that this person is trying to say. And some context clues and stuff. So I didn't always love that the author chose to do that because it makes it harder to read some of those things. Another thing I will say is there are a lot of smoking and drinking. Smoking doesn't bother me so much. It's just one of those things. Everybody did it during that time period and everybody's doing it in the book. But the drinking, there's a lot of drinking and driving going on in this book. Seems like every, farm he stops at, as a thank you, they'll give him a drink. Here's a beer, and then he goes puttering off. And here's another beer, and he goes puttering off. And then they get, very tipsy, and he goes driving off, that kind of thing. And, again, modern reader looking at that, and I'm kind of cringing, going, oh, that's so dangerous. I can't believe they didn't kill themselves. And they have some interesting driving experiences, not just because of the drinking. Like, for example, the car lost brakes. For like 2 weeks he had no brakes. And you're like, again, and it smashed, destroyed several buildings and crashed several times, and how did he survive this? Anyway, so there's a bunch of that going on. And so that's pretty much it. I guess the lack of narrative might be a negative. I mean, you can get kind of tired of all the different short stories without an overarching plot throughout the whole thing. That maybe get a little tiresome for some people, but it can also be a positive, especially if you're like, I want to put the book down and go do something else. This is definitely the kind of book that you could just, you read a short 3-page chapter and, okay, well, I can go on and do something else and come back and it'll be a whole new narrative for the next chapter. And you don't feel like you're never on a cliffhanger on this book, including at the end. So it's a very satisfying read in the end. So overall, I do give this an enthusiastic 2 thumbs up for something that's a fun, true-to-life memoir of a completely different thing that I have never experienced, but it was done in such a good tone with lighthearted humor throughout. It was very fun. So my next book, part 2, is going to be a science fiction book, Leviathan Wakes by James Herriot. This is the first book of the Expanse series. I believe that there's some sort of TV show that's very popular, but I've never seen it, never read anything about this, so this will be my next book. Some sort of space opera, or I don't think it's military science fiction, I think it's space opera. But that'll be fun, so that's my next book. I hope that you will join me. Thank you for watching.